Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this workshop, right? Well, I hope we will have a nice discussion and workshop session during the next 60 to 75 minutes. And it's about designing simulation centers for healthcare education. And very important is the small print, it's an operational perspective. We're not talking about education as such, not about learning objectives, things like that. We're talking about the design and the building, certain things that have proved to be good, certain things that maybe you want to avoid, right? Who to have on your team, things like that. So it's a little bit a bigger room, it's a little bit a bigger setup, so I hope that it's not too confusing for you guys and that we'll still have the opportunity to discuss. The group may be too big to introduce yourselves individually, right? But we will have a section later where we want to start talking about your future plans. So we can, let's say, guide the whole workshop into what your expectations and your demands are for that session, okay? So let's start. My name is Jochen Vollmer. I'm a member of the international team of CAE Healthcare. I'm based in Mainz, Germany, which is closer to London than Nottingham, for example, right? I leave Frankfurt at 8 o'clock and I arrive at 8:30, right? And the time difference helps. So I'm actually not a medical person. I'm not an educator, anything. I'm a trained mathematician and computer scientist. But I happened to start the first simulation center with a few other colleagues in Mainz, Germany at the university. This was back in 1997, right? It was mainly anesthetists. It was an anesthesia-based simulation center at the university hospital. We were the first users of the HPS in continental Europe a year or two after the Bristol Medical Simulation Center started. And we went through a few iterations there, right? And some of you who have a little bit of tenure with simulation will remember that in the beginning, everything was very improvised, right? And then you have maybe a second generation where you learn from this first phase, then you had a third generation, and maybe we're now at the fourth iteration of what people do around simulation and education, right? Because many people not just design simulation centers, but now the whole idea is much broader. In 2005, basically, we moved out of the university and we joined a private company called CAE, who is a small company compared to many of your institutions, right? But it's a 100% privately based company that 100% lives from the courses that they teach using simulation techniques, for example, right? And so from that point of view, this is a very special company because also we had to invent how, for example, simulation could be taught in a way that it sustains itself, right, without the backing from a big institution and, well, with the pressure, let's say, to also feed a few families, of course, right? So, and then it's not in perfect sequence, but at one moment we started offering services for METI, which became CAE later. And my role as a physicist, computer scientist, and so on, I took care of customer service, right? So, and this is also my job at the moment. So at one moment we really became CAE, right? There's a CAE office in Mainz, and I'm one of the people working out of there, and the colleagues working for customer service in the UK are part of my team. So much about me. Okay, so this is basically a little bit our agenda. I don't want to spend too much time on that, so I want to talk a little bit about the background of CAE. Why do we think that we know a little bit how to design centers, what are good practices, and so on, and what is our experience? I'm going to talk about that. There's a link to aviation. I've got a few examples, and it depends on how the time goes. We can watch funny nice videos in YouTube showing you very nice centers, let's say. But I also have some practical things prepared. We are going to look at architectural drawings, and we're going to see whether they make sense, or what are good aspects, what are bad aspects, let's say, what are things that could be improved, and this is something we can do together, right? And on the way there, I'm going to point out a few of these operational things like electricity, network infrastructure, flow of participants, and so on. Okay. So, most of you know CAE as the provider of simulation mannequins and other educational equipment, right? But we are inside of CAE. CAE Healthcare is just a small branch. CAE is a manufacturer of flight simulators. CAE is a big training provider itself in the flight simulation business. So a lot of airlines that cannot afford the simulators, for example, they book time at the CAE simulation center. And of course, CAE also broadens their portfolio with other education and training activities all around safety, basically, right? Could be several things. And in this context, we've built centers, we've consulted people building centers, we've integrated curricula, we've developed, of course, customized solutions and these things, right? And so we, from healthcare, we, of course, learn and we take profit from the experience that the colleagues from aviation and from, let's say, the other CAE divisions have. And basically, we see, this is the same also for CAE Healthcare, that we are basically at the moment, just as aviation, we are in the transition from being a hardware provider to like a solution provider, because, well, hardware is one aspect, but if you don't know how to use the systems and if you don't know how to implement that into your curriculum, you will not be prepared to achieve your learning objectives. And so the same transition we're doing at the moment. And looking at the right setup, looking at the right flow is one of the aspects where we can help. Okay, one of the centers, and we're not going to do that now, we will do that if time allows at the end. That may be easier. Let me quickly see. There's my watch. One of the big centers that we've created a while back, this was in 2015, 16, 17. It's in a country called Turkmenistan, right? And to be honest, this sounds very arrogant. Of course, I had to look it up on the map when we were told we have a project in Turkmenistan. But of course, very exciting. It's the Ministry of Health asked us with a Turkish construction company to design an education center for 21st century medical education. And it's a 7 layers building with wet lab, with dry lab, with simulation, with classrooms and everything. It's a huge project, right? And very exciting, of course. Going to show you a video if time allows. And let's say if you have specific questions, of course, I'm happy to answer that, right? So let me see. Okay, oops. Sorry? No. We'll do that later because I'm not sure what the time allows. So I've got a few questions to the audience, right? So maybe you are here on because of a purpose, right? So probably you're interested in setting up a simulation center. So you may have plans on renovation, on remodeling, on building new. Could you just maybe like popcorn method, give me a few thoughts, what you're planning to do and where you come from? Somebody wants to? Okay, please.
I'm from the University in Leicester.
You're from Leicester, okay.
And we're building renovating a building to become a sim centre
Yeah.
within our campus. We've got clinical skills labs at the minute that we do sort of fairly low fidelity sim in, but we're looking at sort of meeting our competitors really.
Okay.
Very new, shiny sim centres.
Okay. Very good. So clinical skills center, you want to renew it.
Nursing, midwifery, paramedicine, physician associate, pharmacy, and police as well. So it needs to meet lots of different requirements.
Very good, very good. Yeah, it's a multidisciplinary project always. Yeah, very good. What's your time frame?
September next year.
Oh wow, that's that's soon. Okay, and but the building is there already, so you have to live with a.
Building is there,
Yeah.
it's currently being used for office space and a few classrooms.
And so you changed the interior design, basically.
Internal walls
Yeah.
can be completely knocked down.
Okay.
However we want it.
Very exciting. Okay, University of Leicester. Somebody else got a project? Somebody, please? From Brunei. Brunei. Okay. But you say your medical school is yet to be founded. Okay, good. Okay, good. And your timeline?
Medical school 2021, but we're hoping to start the nursing program in 2020, so I need to set something.
Wow. Okay. Steep curve. Okay. Very good. Thank you for joining our session. Somebody else wants to help, please? Yeah. So you run out of space. You're too busy. You need to enlarge your facilities. Yes. Exactly. See, often we have space is not enough. Multidisciplinary was just said, right? The skills room need to be changed to a simulation facility, right? Maybe you have to move stuff around, right? So I mean, it's a lot of things. Maybe you've got the money. Maybe there's constraints. We'll talk about money later, right? Storage, right? So many reasons, right? And so we've got three nice examples, and we can take them as in the back of our head. So, if you say you are planning on launching or on going live next year or maybe the year after, that's pretty steep, right? But it depends what you want to do. I believe the most important message is that you need to find the right people to collaborate with, right? There may be one project manager, but you need to have, let's say, people, and we'll talk about, let's say, which areas you may want to cover. You need to set up a team in the first place. You need to create the same vision of what you want to do, and then everybody in his expertise can work on that. And the most important step in that is basically a contract, right? It's a contract between you, your team, and maybe the institution. And we call this, it's a training needs analysis. So this is basically, it describes where is your, what do you want to achieve, right? What kind of trainings, what kind of participants, what kind of learning objectives basically you want to cover with your new facility, right? And to what scope of, let's say, how many participants, right? Pre-graduate, postgraduate education, how many courses in parallel, what is the group size, and all these things. These questions you need to answer and you need to write down in a so-called training needs analysis, right? And this training needs analysis will be basically your project plan defining on what functions you need to have in your new center, right? Because we're not talking about the educational bit, right? We're not talking about setting up a curriculum or not talking about specific learning objectives, right? But of course, the educational objective of what you want to achieve will have a consequence on the hardware and the rooms and the layout of your facility, right? Okay, and right from the beginning, let's say when you talk about defining your design project, right, you have to think about a few core infrastructure things, right? Which is, of course, water, gas, electricity, that's easy, right? Networking, right? So we need to make sure that we have the right computer infrastructure, basically, right? And one of the things that we really consider to be very central is a so-called center management tool, right? One of these, of course, is here Learning Space. I mean, we're at a CAE show, so I can name the product, but of course there's competitors to that. But if you, right from the beginning, plan how you are going to organize the courses and the flow of the participants through your courses and through your rooms, this plays really a central part in the design process, right? So this is one of the things I believe here, the center management tool, that needs to be decided on right after basically the training needs analysis took place, right? And here, a lot of things, we will go into a little bit more details here. It's about videos, but it's also about audio, right? And this has a consequence to the actual design of your materials, of the walls, the floors, active or passive components that help or create problems during for the acoustic design of the rooms, okay? So define the core team and perform the training needs analysis. Basically develop a contract, develop a common vision of what you want to achieve, and then everybody can work on his own side. Okay, who would be part of that core team? Well, the customer. Who is the customer? The customer is the educators or the department that wants to run such a simulation center. I told you I'm a mathematician, right? I've just been part of several situations where we built simulation centers and where we consulted people. But of course, somebody like me cannot replace an architect, right? You need to have a pro, right, that helps to define, okay, where do sockets need to be put? What is ergonomically correct? What are, let's say, constraints from the legal side, right? See, in the UK, there may be different ones than in other countries. In NHS hospitals may be different than in the private sector. Of course, you need also somebody that can talk the language of the construction people that will later put the walls in place, right? You need a project manager. I mean, the persons being here are probably good candidates for project managers because they've got the vision, they've got the idea. And we believe it makes sense to include somebody that has experience with simulation and with simulation facilities, right? This could be somebody from our team, for example, but also we've got other people that have worked, let's say, in various roles in simulation that could help to consult with that, right? Why is that? Because there's a few simulation-specific elements that you want to incorporate right in the design. Okay, other people that may have a stake in this design team, but they are more like consultants to the core team. Of course, you want to talk to your educators, right? As soon as you have set up a plan, as soon as you have defined a flow through your facilities, maybe you want to go and discuss with the educators or with the faculty whether this makes sense from their point of view, right? You have other people, operators, technicians, administrative people, right, that need to live with the new spaces, so it's good to consult with them. Of course, the decision makers, the people that finance the whole project, need to be kept close to the project as well. In the extended design team, again, we've got the AV specialists, right? Because networking, angles, acoustic environment plays a big role right from the beginning of the design of the center. Okay. If it was a white paper and we had illimited resources, time, money, space, and so on, we could build the best center in the world, right? But this is not how life works. We all know this. There's typically constraints. And so one part of that training needs analysis is you need to spell out exactly what are must-haves in your center. What are nice-to-haves and what would be super cool, right? And then you have a decision metrics to prioritize where you spend your money on. If you have, let's say, the super coolest VR environment, but you cannot do your undergraduate basic trainings, maybe this is off scope and it doesn't work. So, what's needed, what must have? So we can use the 3 examples to collect some of these. We need to prioritize them, and we need to be aware of the constraints, budget, infrastructure, space, for example. But some of the things that that I also recommend to have in the back of your head, you need to think about a certain durability of your approach, right? Or that it can last for a certain time. For example, over there in London, excuse me, lady, how long have you used your old center where you say you've outgrown this one? For how many years? 3 years only. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, we don't know how education will look like or what tools and so on will be available in like 10 years, right? That maybe this horizon may be too long, but maybe a 5-year plan, that's what we believe is a good thing to have. So you need to make sure that you scale your project such that you can say, well, within the next 5 years, you will be able to cope with everything that you have. Or, for example, right from the start of the design, think about how could your center be expanded in case more students come, maybe it's successful, or you want to add another function or another discipline into your environment, right? So these things may be important to look at right from the beginning. Okay, so maybe we want to collect a few things. So we've got here, for example, the multidisciplinary center in Leicester, right? And it may be good, let's say, to just in popcorn method again, collect a few ideas. Okay, what are things that are core, that need to be in your center, and what would be very cool to have? I mean, police people, you want to have a shooting range, for example. I don't know. So, shall we quickly collect a few things that are really indispensable for a simulation center? Okay, so let me write must have, desired, right? So, okay, we need to have the possibility for video debriefing, okay? Video capture, he said. Okay, what else? Space, yeah, okay. Like for what, for example? Storage, very good. Storage. What is the importance of storage? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So let's call it efficient design, right? So I'm not sure, my voice, I hear my voice very loud and your voice is not very loud. So she said it's important to have the storage located in a strategically good place so you don't waste a lot of time and so on, right? Okay, storage, what do you need storage for? We will have a separate slide on that. Typically, you don't have enough space to create for each of the training settings that you have a separate room. So your rooms need to be somewhat flexible, right? And how do you convert a generic room into a ward, into an ICU, or into an emergency room, for example? This is by replacing a few key pieces, like patient monitor versus a normal patient bed versus maybe some flowers on the on the table or something like that, right? And this, of course, you need to store. So storage is basically the key for realism in the end, right? Okay, what else? What do we need? Huh? Multiple rooms, yes, okay. Okay, yeah, just shout. I can. Okay, what would be great to have? Come on, give me some examples. Okay. That's desired, or is that a must-have? As a must-have, okay, yeah. Specific debriefing areas, yeah. Well, I mean, if space would be a constraint, right? You could use the same room that you do the teaching also for the debriefing, but then you limit yourself with the number of classes that you can do at the same time, right? Okay? Okay? Very realistic, very down to earth, everybody here, all just must haves. Okay, come on. Audio, yeah, video, audio. Okay. Yeah, what else? Control room, okay, yeah. Control room. Utilities, yeah, right. Yeah, utilities, we can continue. You may have to have like a rest area. You need to have offices, maybe for the faculty, right? So what would be, let's say, really great? I mean, you said you want to beat the competition in your area, right? So what is, let's say, your differentiator?
What you've got on must-have is certainly the things we would consider it as essential.
Yes.
But I think it's about that flexibility of the space. So the actual equipment we've got to be able to make those different areas. So thinking about like the difference between like a hospital environment, a home environment,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A street environment.
Yes.
Those sort of things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
How we create that, specific solutions.
Yeah. Let me write flexible here. But let's say you can dream now. How do you make a policeman happy?
Give him more money.
Give him more money, yeah, that's very, okay. 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 Yeah, but that's not so much planning, so that's more, that's not so much, let's say, rooms and design. So faculty, you could say restroom for the faculties to relax, massage room. Huh?
One of the things we've talked about is whether, I don't know what other places do, probably more sort of academic institutions. At the minute, we don't make our nurses change into uniform, but the paramedics do.
Yeah.
So whether it's we have sort of like those changing rooms so that they
Yeah.
come in the mindset as well.
Okay.
And sort of a
So-
breakout area for the students as well. Maybe.
Yeah. Breakout area because you may say, well, they can use the regular cafeteria, for example, if you don't have the space, let's say, and you say changing rooms, right? Is that okay if I call it like this? Right. Because that may be important. This may add, let's say, a certain level of realism, but if you have to cut on something else,
Yeah.
this would be not so high prioritized. Okay, good. Okay, anything else? But you please.
Environmental control.
In. Yeah, right. Yeah, let me ACS, like air conditioned snow, okay? Yeah.
Flow, so ideally desirable would be a new build so that you're not having to work to constraints of an existing building.
Yeah.
Have patient flow working exactly how you want.
Yeah, okay, right. Desired would be ideal flow, right? Okay.
Being able to change the lighting.
Yeah, lightning. Must have desired? Yeah? Sure. Yeah. Okay, something, but you get the idea, right? You need to specify what you want and what you need, right? And we have a little bit, let's say, I put a list of stuff, right? So the keynote this morning, we need to have a VR area, fully immersed, street scene, combat scene, kidnapping scene for the firefighters and for the police, right? CBT, computer-based training areas, right? Full-scale simulation area with fully immersed environment with high-fidelity mannequins, right? Where you go briefing, debriefing, right? Where you have a flow through the different stations, right? Some people need have simulated patients areas, right? That have different constraints. You may want to have lecture theaters, right? In case you talk about a specific medical application, maybe you want to first spread out the theory and then practice, let's say. Right? But of course, let's say there's other things. You need to think about offices. There's people that are working there. Somebody mentioned faculty, of course. If you do courses for people from the outside, so you may have to have like a reception area where people can register, right? Where you change room, restroom, storage utilities, right? Break zones, waiting areas. And the last line, we'll come to that in more detail later. It may be smart you were talking about the ideal flow. It may be smart to separate, by the way, how your center is designed, faculty from participants. We'll come to that. And very easy to understand why we want to separate that. For example, think about your simulated patients area, right? And if you have, let's say, a patient with a make-up wound walking the same corridor into the room where later your trainee comes in, he already gets an idea of what's happening, right? So you may want to separate these things for educational purposes, okay? So what kind of constraints do we have? Well, there may be existing programs, right? When you build a new center, you may want to say, well, now I want to change the way how medicine is taught in my institution. That may not be realistic, right? You have to cope with existing programs. There are space limitations, the budget, of course. Constraints may also be, like in your training needs analysis, right? You will define the number of participants, the group sizes, how many concurrent sessions you are planning. This will very easily define how many rooms you need, how big your corridors, your waiting areas, your changing rooms, and all these things would be. And of course, if you say you want to work with 50 participants, 50 trainees at the same time, for example, split in 3 groups, let's say, an architect will be able to tell you what size of room do you need to cope with 15 people at the same time, for example. Okay? You may have to integrate existing equipment, right? And you may want to look at, okay, what kind of medical disciplines, and this list, of course, is not exhaustive, you want to work with, right? And if now you're planning on a big center, and maybe the impulse comes from one department only, say anesthesia or nursing, for example, you may want to, in the design phase, you may want to knock on the doors of the other disciplines just to make sure that you open your center and you create that synergy, right? So as soon as you finished your center and it's only a one department type of center, and the other departments cannot participate, right? Maybe it's not smart for the institution. Okay. So one of the things that also during the training needs analysis needs to be defined, okay, how are you going to use your space? Like, what is the type of training that you're doing? And I mean, you're more educators than I am, I'm sure, but even I can think about different types of trainings. Let me say, didactic training could be like somebody showing something on an animal, on an experiment, on a simulator, right? Demonstrating that to a team of participants. So you have one instructor and a number, basically an illimited number of trainees, could be web podcasted or web streamed, right? And on the other side, you would have like this crew resource or crisis resource management training where you actually always want to work in a realistic size of team, maybe just 3 people in a room, right? So you can, and 3 people, and then you need a debriefer, you need an operator, you need to have a technician maybe, so it's very expensive, let's say, right? Very, a lot of effort. You can have things like bedside teaching, so you do a ward round, the supervising doctor is there with his young colleagues, right? And they discuss on a medical case, right, on bedside, maybe a ratio of 1 instructor to 5, 6 participants, right? Very interactive. Virtual reality, CBT, computer-based training, simulated patients, we talked about that, dry lab, wet lab, right? And of course, there is a reason why there's also skill and partial task trainer areas where maybe students can train on themselves without a highly qualified instructor, maybe just somebody that hands out equipment, that receives the equipment back, and the students can practice on themselves, just like as with the computer-based training. Okay, so this was mentioned already before, right? We typically have a limitation with the room size. And so it's very important that we are smart on how we're using the room, right? And I have not chosen a clinical scene. It's maybe IKEA, I don't know, right? And it's, but I liked it a lot. You see, it's always the same elements, the same lamp, the same couch, right? The same sofa. But the wall is painted differently, different pictures, a little bit differently arranged. And it is a completely different scene. And the same happens, right? You've got the patient, you've got the bed, you have maybe some medical equipment, but then a few bits and pieces you change, and all of a sudden it becomes an emergency room, it becomes a ward, it becomes an intensive care unit, right? And so the cost for the flexibility is that you need to think about where you store your equipment. So storage is something that's very easily forgotten, and probably your storage space needs to be bigger than the actual OR, let's say, that you work with. Okay? Okay. So there's a decision that you need to make whether you have dedicated rooms. Some rooms may require specific infrastructure, like on gases, on networking, and so on. Or maybe the equipment is super expensive and you don't want to move it around all the time or something. But many places can be used as multi-purpose room. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the utilities. Some simulators, so for example, like the CAE HBS, of course, has the possibility to connect to real and unmodified medical equipment, patient monitors, ventilators, and so on, right? That is, of course, an extreme, right? And so that means that your infrastructure needs to cater all the technical requirements, like compressed air, oxygen, nitrogen, CO2, different things. If you want to do real anesthesia, volatile anesthesia, you need to think about scavenging, right? You need to think about maybe nitrous oxide. This needs to be piped in or prepared in the design already. But even if you don't talk about the HBS itself, quite often it makes sense to be able to run medical equipment, right? And that means you want to have piped oxygen, you want to have piped air in your walls, just in the same way how you would access that in your hospital. So you can maybe take from a real hospital space the unmodified equipment, just plug it into your wall, right? Okay? So this may be an expensive part of the project, and this is a decision that you need to make right from the beginning, because it's deep down in the walls, and expensive, well, because there's pipes, there's labor needed to do that. But it needs to be a conscious decision. It's nothing worse, let's say, if you want to show somebody how, for example, a ventilator works, and then in the end it doesn't work because there is not a source of compressed air, for example, to run it. Okay? So, we've talked about audio and video, and I want to give a word on the audio-video side. And you see, it's more on the audio side, because video is easy, right? What is the function for of an audio-video system? What do you use it for?
Communication.
Communication between who?
Between the mannequin or the candidates.
Okay, yeah, okay, so like voice of God, or, okay, perfect, okay. That's audio, okay. Observation. Yeah, okay, very good, yeah, okay. Observation, and for debriefing, of course, right, okay. So, there was a lot of hype about HD, high-definition cameras, right? I believe that does not make any big difference if it's, let's say, if you have a scene, like for debriefing purposes, for example, that is that size or that is that size, and it's 4K or 8K or just single definition, because your eye really very well understands what's happening, right? And you want to observe an action, and the arm is, let's say, sufficiently big that even with a 1K resolution, let's say, you would see what that arm or that hand is doing, right? So the focus, let's say, on the high definition of the video, I believe, is misleading. More important is to make sure that you really grasp everything that's being said in a room. Quite often it's like the communication and so on. And of course, we want that the participants, of course, they communicate, so we understand what's going on in their heads, and so they're open about it. But of course, it's very artificial if they always have to speak up and loud and slowly so we can grab it on the video. That's not real, right? If people then in a stressful moment, right, or they start mumbling or they start talking, let's say, inappropriately and short and what have you, right? And this you want to grab, right? In some situations, specifically in this crisis resource management training, when it's about workload, it's about team communication and so on, you really want to understand what and how somebody said something. Right? And so it's very important that you have a good audio system. And this also may be something to think about very early, because you see, we've got, for example, here, ventilation, AC outlets. There's a constant hum, right? The room has reflecting walls, right? You need to make a decision whether you have, let's say, a certain area where you have very good pointed microphones, for example, taking a certain area, whether you have how do you call them, lapel type microphones, or and imagine, like for example, a ventilator or a patient monitor. Once this alarm triggers, right? The alarms, they are made to be heard, of course, right? And once you have an alarm in a critical situation running, and you just have, let's say, one omnidirectional microphone, for example, for the whole room, you will not be able to understand any communication, right? And also, let's say, if you think about, okay, yes, sure, every participant will have a lapel microphone, will have some room microphones. In the end, if you have 5, 6 audio sources at the same time, maybe you have to have somebody that controls a mixer. That's also very expensive because it's +1 faculty, basically, right? So it's pros and cons, and you need to think about that. But I just want to raise the flag and say audio is super important, and you need to think about that right from the beginning. Okay? And, well, it may be good to talk to somebody that has experience with that. If you come to our session at the following session, so we've got a few people here in the UK specifically, like Tom Sharp, for example, who has a lot of experience with the audiovisual side, for example, and he's happy to come to your place and to consult with you, for example, to give you some ideas or to try out certain types of microphones, for example. Okay, electrical and IT infrastructure, of course, you need to think about networking everywhere. You need to think about the sufficient bandwidth, and you can imagine 10 years back, probably the requirements on bandwidth on networking were completely different than they are today. Okay? So storage, we talked about that, always underestimated. You need to calculate the size by the functions that you want to put into a room and what kind of equipment you have. Right, let me go a little bit faster. Okay. The next big thing is, and now we're approaching the architectural designs, is when you lay out your center, you need to think about how do your participants flow through the center. And why? Because there may be like a logical path, right? But there are certain situations, just to give you an idea, that you want to avoid. For example, your high fidelity simulator, right? You got a certain scenario set up in that high fidelity simulator, and several groups of participants shall go through that same scenario, one after another, right? And what you want to avoid is that the trainees who have just had that situation step outside of the room and they meet the ones that are just going to experience, right? Because one word will basically release the secret, and then half of the fun is gone, right? So think about that. Yes, so we're going to look now at a few layouts. This is from a book, Clinical Simulation, old book, 10 years old already, but big book, like a Bible for many people that start with simulation. And for example, that's a screenshot from a simulation center for simulated patients, right? And here you can see very well how the students and the faculty are separated from each other. Let me quickly just see that. So we have, because we have rooms, like this is a typical simulated patient room with two doors. One door, the trainee enters, the other door, the simulated patient enters. And you see there are separate corridors. So the corridors on the outside, these are the corridors where the faculty moves. And the corridor in the inside is where the simulated patients move. And there's like a typical flow. You go from left to right and you exit the center from here, right? And there's a waiting area and there's a post-show waiting area, I don't know, for a questionnaire or whatever. So it's a very smart and just a logical flow. And you see, sorry, the participants, they go this corridor, sorry, and the faculty goes this corridor, because these are the training rooms, and all these rooms, they are to support the training. Yeah, you got the changing rooms for the simulated patients, you have some offices, some storage, and so on. And always from the back door, you can cater and you can change the scene in the simulated patients room, right? So that's, let's say, ideal and a new building. So let's have a look. This is now from an existing space. And so you see this area was empty and they wanted to have simulated patients, a simulated patients facility, right? And you can still see there's again this two corridor concept and the supporting side and the trainee side, right? So if the concept, let's say, is clear, then you can still have a smart and logical workflow through your center. Okay, let's talk about the logical flow for briefing, simulation, and debriefing. This is from one of the centers where we're going to watch a video later. This is in Acıbadem University in Turkey, Istanbul. Private university, big, huge, everything nice. I mean, you're in England, we're in Germany, we don't have such a nice university, I have to say. It's really cool. And here again, the green line is the public space, right? Staircases, corridor, lecture theater, and let's say award situation, right? With, you see here, different stations here, right? And we're going to look at these CRM training environments. And what is turquoise, or this light gray, is the private area where the staff and the faculty moves, or the exit part, right? And so you can see there's, for example, here, there's a high fidelity mannequin set up. The participants come here. They enter into this little corridor, right? But you can close the door already. This corridor they use for briefing, right? So there's a quick introduction to the scene that they're going to see. Then they enter the room, they work their thing. There's a control room controlling the simulator, observing what the participants do and changing everything. And then they can exit going into a debriefing room, right? And then once the debriefing is done, they leave through this corridor and they go home, basically. They leave the center, right? So that means that anybody who has been through this scenario will never see anybody who has not seen the scenario, right? As soon as the door behind you is closed in the briefing section, you will never go out into a public area anymore. Very smart, I believe. Okay, so there's a little bit, there's the same, there's a similar setting. No, there's a different, sorry. We need to go back. So, okay, so you see, you understand the flow. And for economy of space, one briefing room and one debriefing room caters to simulation rooms. So they can basically alternatively be used, right? And not every room has one debriefing room. It's like two simulation rooms and one briefing and one debriefing room at the same time. Okay. So the next thing that you may want to think of is, how do you put your control room? Right? So there's pros and cons, right? So there was a time when people designed control rooms such that there was like a central control room, and you could cater all kind of other functions. So you see here, for example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 training rooms adjacent to a control room, and you've got the instructors or the operators sitting behind one-sided mirrors, and they control what's going on there. Very cool in many ways, right? Because you can always access from the central control room, you can access the rooms and change things and so on. The only disadvantage of such a design is that it's pretty noisy typically. And that for the operator, it's a challenge, and it's very demanding on them, right? You have to be the voice of God, you have to be the patient's voice, you have to call in with laboratory results or something like that. And so you're very busy, but it's maybe 4 people busy at the same time, so it's very noisy and stressful for the operator, but with certain advantages. Okay, so after we finished, we are going to look at the video from Acibadem. I don't want to do that now, so I can squeeze in one more exercise. Okay, so now I've got two layouts that I would want to discuss with you. So this is a plan for a simulation center somewhere in the Middle East. It's a small simulation center, actually, right? It's a relatively small space. Don't know if you can see that this is like 10 meters, 8.89 meters, right? You would have to calculate that, right? A square. There are a few must-haves, like, for example, there's a corridor, the red lines is a corridor that needs to be there for emergency exits and stuff like that. You see there's an exit to the right, there's an exit to the left. And the idea of that institution is they want to have something like a virtual hospital replicated, so different hospital functions. It shall be representative, shall be nice, emergency, ICU, gynecology. It's an annex to an existing building, education building. So here, there's like a lot of lecture rooms and seminar rooms, breakout rooms, and so on, right? And the idea is, well, they want to use it for small groups. Postgraduate, as I said, representative, the minister wants to come, a lot of glass and all these things, right? And one of the things that they considered very important is the public versus private aspect, right? So what happens behind the scenes should, let's say, stay behind the scenes. So what do you think? Can you read what it says there? Yeah, okay. Is it good? Is it bad? Give me some comments. Anything you would recommend to change? The control rooms are quite small. That's a good point. So there's one control room. So there's ICU, there's a control room. Very good. There's labor, so gynecology and obstetrics. There's a control room. Very good. Wait, let's talk first about the control room. So there is this control room here. How do you access the control room? Yeah, is that good? Not so smart, right? So for example, shit, I forgot the defibrillator, right? So then you have to walk through the scene, you disturb what's going on in the room, and then you come back with the equipment, maybe giving a hint of how the scenario is resolved, right? Not so smart, right? We want to change that, okay? Okay, what else? Storage. Somebody said something about storage? Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Somebody said something about storage. Small area, oh, it's a huge storage area. But how do you access that? Right? Again, think about you have to put in a patient trolley or a bed, right? You have to go through the room, through the control room. That's not very smart, right? Probably, right? Okay, so you get the idea. Huh? there's a lot of things that you can improve on that, right? And just to give you one example of how, for example, now it's being built. Now you say, oh my God, this is complete bullshit, but it's built like that, I'm sorry, right? Okay, so this is how this looks like. So the dimensions, it's the same, it's just, let's say, now a real architectural drawing. And so your idea with the central control room, yes, we did that as well. So there's the central control room, right? We have, of course, well, the participants come from the educational building from here. Of course, there needs to be a reception area, there needs to be a waiting area, we need a few offices and so on, right? And then we have the possibility, so of course, it's not ideal because, of course, also the customer, let's say, had a few comments and things that they didn't want to have implemented, right? So, for example, we got an emergency room set up, we got an operating room set up, we got a recovery ICU room set up with the idea to be able to rotate a group through this, right? And ideally, these rooms would be connected with doors. The customer didn't want that, but say ideally. You got, let's say, a corridor, which is, let's say, the public corridor, where the participants go back and forth, right? And for example, once they leave the operating room, it's just across the corridor to one of the debriefing rooms, for example, so small distances, let's say. And we have an area which is more like the supporting area, which is here, which is, well, there's a multi-purpose room, okay, I don't want to go into details here what's being planned here, but there's a storage room, you see, with wide enough doors so you can put in medical equipment, and you can access the storage from the control room, and from the control room you can cater all the different rooms with your secret hints, for example, right? So just to give you, let's say, an idea of how that could be changed, and of course, you can organize everything from the faculty and from the operator side without disturbing the course activities, right? Here, there's some computer-based training station set up, which is a little bit a compromise and so on. But you get the idea. This is, I believe, has a few advantages compared to the other one. And if I go back, right, here, you see, we also have a huge corridor and so on. So it looks that the other center, the other design has less functions. It's actually maybe just one room that we change, right? Because this corridor, basically, that used to be here is now here, but which has a purpose, of course. Okay, so let me see. That was all that I wanted to show you. And as a little plus, let's say, let's have a look at this Turkish simulation center. Maybe you want to go to Istanbul anyways, it's a beautiful city, visit this center, it's very cool. Okay, would you play the second video? Yeah, it's just music, you don't have to make it so loud. I can. So it's a private university, right? It's a medical university, and it's one complete floor with education area and another floor with wet lab and so on, dry lab, and it's very cool. It's very exciting. Well, well, there's students also. It's a private university, so students pay a lot of money to study there. So this. Yeah.
Bir üniversiteden ne beklersin? Hayalini kurduğun her şey var, değil mi? Ancak hala bir eksik var. O da sensin.
I hope it's the right video. Let me see.
Senin gözlerinle gören,
Yeah, then I took the wrong video.
senin kulaklarınla duyan,
Yeah, let me go back here. Yeah, excuse me. I mean, they do other things as well, but there's one specifically on the... Let me see. Here, that's the one. Okay, excuse me. So this was the wrong video on the university. I copied the wrong link. Okay. So they have a virtual reality environment, basically with projections all around, right? And you've already seen there's an ambulance that can like move. It's like an ambulance, but it's a real ambulance, right? That they can use. Like a home care scene. Right? Okay. Okay. So this gives you an idea of how I believe a 21st century simulation center can look like, right? It's very cool. As I said, it's an invitation. If you go to Turkey, to Istanbul, visit that center. I think this is one of the best that we have at the moment in Europe, right? And I'm looking forward to seeing your new centers